What if giving away your expertise would create so much client growth that you couldn't keep up? What if your business went from 500, 600 million to nearly 4 billion in just 6 years? What would break? What would sustain? And how would you figure out how to turn down the temperature maybe on the processes while also maintaining your momentum? Today's guest has been in the driver's seat for it all. James Bogart is the founder and CEO of Bogart Wealth, one of the fastest growing independent RIAs in the country. He's turned organic growth into a game and he's played it to win. And he made the most important shift for mega high growth firms from producer to CEO. This is Advisors Off Script. Let's get into it. Welcome to Advisors Off Script, stories from the independent front lines. I'm your host, Shelby Nickel. I've been so looking forward to this conversation because your growth story is obviously tremendous and you talk about it a lot. And it's not just a marketing pivot, but it's an entire business strategy change. And you've said a lot that, kind of everything breaks and that you just keep on going. So let's start with what you say you're really good at and that many advisors are not good at, which is knowing what the value is of the advisor. Talk about that a little bit.
I think fundamentally our industry is a little flawed in that we're teaching this next generation of advisors phenomenal skill sets, right? Like, whether it's building financial plans or tax optimization strategies or how to build an asset allocation and talk about different investment narratives. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, the role of an advisor isn't necessarily each of those things independently. The role of the advisor actually is all about solving people's problems. And a really good advisor puts themselves in a position to be able to anticipate what someone's problems are going to be. And we do that through the planning and through the investments and through the tax and through the estate, like all the different components of what we do is our value proposition. But that reshift of mindset, of purpose and role, I think was probably the most transformative thing for me. And really, when I think about our growth story and why we had the level of success that we did, it was really heavily driven by that. I mean, and so, Shelby, I shared the story with you on our prep call, but, I was on a trip with another advisor. He's at one of the brokerage firms. And we decided to have a prospecting competition, a friendly game between the two of us. And I'll fully attest, I'm a very competitive person. But, as we're sitting there, we're actually on a ski trip. And we agreed to spend the whole day just talking to different people. It's obviously a very affluent market, target rich environment, to see who could get more prospects off of it. And at the end of the day, he got 2, I got 11. And so, of course, he was buying our drinks at the end because that was the wager. And he's like, I got to know, how'd you do it? And I said, well, before, let me ask you, how did you present yourself when you were talking to these prospects? And, he flat out said, well, I'm a financial advisor at X, Y, and Z company. I'm like, yeah, that's where you went wrong. You lost him literally in the first 15 seconds. And he's like, all right, well, how'd you do it? And I will attest, I had a little bit of an unfair advantage because my wife was with me and it might soften the conversation a bit. But, I flat out introduced myself as a problem solver. And you could tell I immediately, at a minimum, bought myself another 20 seconds. Right.
Yep.
And it's that engagement and that reframe that's so important, because when I think about what individuals are looking for right now, the reality of it is technology is absolutely going to replace a lot of the, let's just say, scalable part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Anything that's analysis, data driven, like most at this point, we're already there. Technology is better than most financial advisors in that regards. The human side is what matters the most. And I think when it comes to how we connect and engage, the empathy, it really comes back to understanding what people's problems are. And I think I want to relate this back to the journey and probably me as I became a better financial advisor. But I remember very, very vividly the day that I learned to listen. Right. And I think, early on in my career, I let's just, I fully attest, I also have an ego, right? Like it's just part of it. But I felt like I had to tell people how smart I was and all the things that I knew. And what I realized probably 7, 8 years into my career is I didn't need to do that. Right. I needed to listen. And then as soon as I started listening, And truthfully, all of this came from one of the critical hires I had in my journey, where I realized very clearly on he was way smarter than I was, and the engagement with him was so important because as smart as he was, I learned that I actually looked a lot smarter just by listening to him and then asking him pointed questions that were very direct, intentional to his situation. And then we were able to learn how to work together in that regards. But I would come back to this whole narrative. As soon as you can listen to what people's problems are and then put yourself in a position to be able to help them solve those problems over the next 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 years,
Mhm.
that's when the engagement level becomes unparalleled to any other advisor in the industry.
Totally agree. And that's also where you start to see where you can get real conviction about your own value as well. I think about it from our business. Everything that we do is because somebody came and asked me to do it. But I think it's not just that they asked, it was that I was able to listen to what their need was and then figure out how to do it and do it better than anybody else and have high conviction about that.
Because people wouldn't ask you if they didn't have a problem, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Exactly.
I come back to because I do think the landscape is changing dramatically with technology, and I think it's the pace of change is going to continue to accelerate
Hmm.
faster than any of us can actually anticipate. But the cold hard reality of it is the human side of what we do. And this is where whether it's being a financial advisor, being a service oriented consultant, or even just service industries, right? It's like, what are the problems that we are trying to solve?
Yeah.
And for some, it might be a very simple, like I think about when we go out to eat. I love like I live for a great service experience. Like, and now I've kind of curated the places that I want to go, not necessarily based upon atmosphere. Yeah, atmosphere is nice, but if I'm going to get a great service experience, it could be a hole in the wall, not necessarily great restaurant,
Yeah.
but if it gives me that wow factor from a service side, that's what uniquely differentiates, and that's why I continue to come back. I still think about the same level of engagement that we do day in and day out when we're working with households.
Yeah, love that. One of the things that you've said also is about the different kinds of advisors. Talk about zoo hunters, zookeepers. Tell me all the zoo things.
I've trademarked this, all right?
All
So,
right, good. I love
so
it.
I do believe that there are different types of advisors in this space. And I think when I talk about an enduring firm, I think every enduring firm needs to have each of the different types of advisors. But what I mean is that there's a jungle hunter, a zoo hunter, and zookeeper, right? So there's three different types. But the jungle hunter is the individual that goes out, they're able to hunt, they're able to kill, and they're able to bring it in, and everybody eats off of it, right? And to me, that really is like the era of the broker, right? That
Hmm.
worked at the wirehouses, right? Like in that environment, you eat what you kill. You have to produce and perform in order to stay hired, right? Like that really was the mindset for the longest time. I do think it's shifting a little bit now, but there still is a very heavy jungle hunter bias within those types of organizations. But then you have your zoo hunters. These are individuals that are super gifted at winning business that is within an enclosed environment, right?
Yeah,
And
gotcha.
then you have your zookeepers, which are your more service oriented advisors. They're not necessarily comfortable going out prospecting, but they are imperative to help give that client experience that's so bespoke and unique that is empowering not only the zoo hunters, but the jungle hunters to be able to go out and do what they do. Right. So I think when we talk about what builds an enduring firm, you have to think of an organization that has each of those different types of environment advisors. For the longest time, and I know we were talking about this, but the longest time I thought I needed an entire organization of jungle hunters, be a bunch of Jameses. And the reality of it is that's a disaster, right? Like, and I mean that with the utmost sincerity, right? But like when it comes down to the personality types of a jungle hunters, you build an organization full of alphas, and you're going to have constant friction, constant contention, and that's not what builds an enduring organization, right? You need to have that support infrastructure that's going to be able to deliver that experience that you are out promising to each and every one of these households that's engaging and working with you. The second you lose sight of that, now all of a sudden you're going to have lack of communication, lack of clarity of purpose, roles, definitions. Like it just doesn't work. And from my lens, I think it's important to be able to understand that not every single advisor is a jungle hunter. And once I did that reframe, It really was a dramatic shift within the organization. And I also think that it's opening up the doors for talent that we didn't have before, right? And
Hmm.
and this is where I think again, I hope every organization is fortunate enough to have the 100 to 150 leads every single month like we do. Once you get to that place and then you start looking at the scaling that's required within it, you're needing to do this talent war that's at a pace that's unparalleled right now. And so you need to have the different elements of Advisor Core without being able to sacrifice what your firm represents, your brand, your presence, your service offering. And so again, when I think about our growth journey, I mean, you nailed it. We literally tested every system, every process. I would say Bogart Wealth was built off of the Herculean feats of some really special individuals, and we figured things out along the way. And it comes back to identifying these types of individuals. And I think about one of my advisors. I remember vividly, and this was 2020. He came on, and originally the goal was to help me and transition business off of me to him. All of a sudden, we had this lead flow that was just I was drowning. The other advisors were at a place where they were drowning, and I said to him, I said, "How do you feel about prospecting?" And he's like, "Look, I can close. I'm just not the best hunter." Light bulb went off, right? And that's when all of a sudden we build all of our training modules of like, this is exactly what this meeting's like. This is exactly what this meeting's like. This is how you present this type of presentation. And we built that very systematized prospect to client experience. By the way, we have the same on the client side, a uniform client experience for every single client within the organization, but that systems, that process and training. And now all of a sudden his book is larger than mine. Like I mean, you want to talk about the ultimate success story, like he is it. And I hope to continue to replicate that within this organization time and time again. And to be clear, I've now got 8 or 9 individuals that are having the same journey right now. And it's amazing to watch. And when I think about my purpose, like that's what I lean into now. And I hope to continue to be able to grow as we continue to grow the organization.
I love that. You mentioned talent war, and we're definitely seeing it just across the entire industry, right? But we've been talking about this like looming talent shortage for a really long time. And I don't even think we were seeing it 5 years ago, but we are now. Like now, the hunt for talent is so much tighter. It's so much harder to find the right person for the organization. Is talent your biggest challenge today?
It is, but it's not necessarily in the way that I think a lot of other organizations are experiencing it. And I'll kind of try to paraphrase the journey, right? But like in 2020, we had 12 individuals. We're
Yeah.
sitting at 63 right now. So I mean, that's 6 years. We've had some pretty dramatic staffing change, and the shift that's happened as an organization. We're almost at 4 billion in assets now, and so the shift that's happened within the organization has been dramatic. You talk about the move from practice to enterprise. And part of it was me getting out of my own way. I fully attest. I am not the best when it comes to managing people. Like that is not my gift. That's not my skill set. And so it's been really, really important for me to surround myself with people who are good at managing people. And that was part of that journey, right? Like we go from a head count of 12 up to north of 60. And it was really, really, really important to get that infrastructure built around me. I was probably a little too slow to build out my executive leadership team. And I don't mean that to disparage anyone that was on my team at the time. But the needs of a 500-600 million dollar organization versus the needs of a 3.5 to 4 billion dollar organization are just fundamentally different, right?
Hmm.
We went from, I would just say, very flat to all of a sudden going vertical, and now we've got management roles and we've got layers essentially. And maintaining that culture integrity is extremely, extremely important. So what I've done essentially with the roles is bifurcated between our advisory core and then our non-advisory core. And the reason for doing that is simply because we need to be thinking about capacity within the organization as we continue to grow and scale. And this is where, just a quick tangent, but data integrity is imperative. I think every organization, no matter how big you are, you need to be investing in the quality of your data. the quality of the output is directly reflected on the quality of the input. And so it's understanding, what your client acquisitions costs are, what your close ratios are, because then you can start building that pathway forward and what you're looking at from a scaling perspective. And this is why I've done this bifurcation. So in 2021, I built Advisor Growth Track, which is an accelerated training program for the next generation of advisors. We talk about this war for talent, and I'll be the first to admit, I was just downright negative about Gen Zs, and just to a point where it just wasn't engaging, wasn't. And I've had some great mentors over my career, and some coaches that I've worked with, and really got a great refrain around the role of a Gen Z and how they think. And what I came to appreciate with Gen Zs in particular is that they are a very, let's just say, task oriented generation, and they're a very cohort oriented generation. You think about how they've been raised, it's teams for virtually everything, right? And so for us, what we did with Advisor Growth Track is we gave them this collegial cohort environment. So it's 4 to 6 individuals. They come in every single graduating class out of these financial planning programs. Then they give them on the job training where they're sitting within each of the departments of the organization. And then they go and sit seat 2 behind the lead advisors, where they're sitting in an apprenticeship type of role. And mind you, this is another part of one of the things that I'd say in my career that I got very lucky with. It was kind of an original brainchild, and now all of a sudden it's taken this organic element of its own. It has been a challenge, right, to get the pathwaying right, and then to get it managed correctly. But the reality of it is that we now have an army of advisors that are going to, in the next 3 to 7 years, completely change what Bogart Wealth looks like in the future. And when I think about how important that is within the organization, because it's helping us with our talent for non-advisory roles, right? Because these individuals are sitting within each of the different departments, because it builds that next generation of talent. But simultaneously, we're now also building in the infrastructure for next generation advisor growth. And so the reason I'm going down this pathway just with talent is because when I think about Advisor Growth Track, it's something where training is an imperative part of any organization. And that was something I would tell you I was too slow to. But being able to give that career pathway, I can't tell you the number of individuals that we're hiring now, because we have not only the growth, because I do think growth is an absolute element of culture, but we're showing them the pathway in
Yeah.
order to be able to have a future. I've got an individual that I'm talking to right now that I'm probably going to end up hiring and opening up a new market off of him, because I have conviction in his ability to go out and get business. And I also have the training and the infrastructure that I can do that. Right. And by the way, this is a little bit of a bespoke conversation, but the point with all of it is, if it weren't for that infrastructure and that foundation, I don't think we would be successful, and I wouldn't be willing to make that investment. So when I think about the talent war now, coming back to the original question, I think it's really important understanding the framing and being able to give these individuals the pathway for growth. We were blessed. We had 119 applicants for the last 4 slots of AGT this last year. Like,
Wow.
so we're unfortunately turning away, in my opinion, great talent simply because of the capacity constraints that we still have. And so, and most of it's right now is building that training infrastructure, and then not having disruption within the organization, right? Like being, knowing where you are in this growth cycle.
Well, and you're
But I also,
balancing that organic growth you're balancing your lead flow with the capacity that you have and the talent.
yep.
Or do you think like, gosh, if I had the talent and I could train them properly, I could just turn up the spigot
Um,
or both?
a little bit of both,
Yeah.
candidly. The thing about organic growth is, I think a lot of individuals do not have patience associated with organic growth initiatives. It's like, I always think of the guys that put up the signs to mow lawns or move or whatever. It's like, you can't just put up a sign and say I'm an advisor and expect lead flow. That's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so in order to have really successful organic growth, you need to commit to whatever it is, right? And so, we've really gone all in on niche based marketing. I would say that what we've built is very bespoke in our industry, and we are subject matter experts in very defined verticals. But the success that we've had is because of 20 years of presence, right? Like, and the things that I did 15 years ago to build the platform for where we are today. We're a very different organization than what we were when, 15, 20 years ago. The reality, right? Like, And mostly because of that infrastructure that was built then is why we are now. And we went really deep within one Fortune 500 company. We became the masters of that ecosystem. We knew their benefit plans arguably better than their HR department did, specifically how to translate decisions that these individuals had to make that had material financial consequences to them at these specific life events. And that became the engine, right? We knew it. But still do, by the way. But we, it's one of those that I have then taken what we built there and replicated it into other organizations. But the reality of it is those other organizations combined still don't come close to the lead flow that we have off of the presence with the 20-year organization. It's just, and I don't have the expectation that they will, right? And it's funny, I hired a business development director 18 months ago, and she's really hard on herself. But like when she's like, well, we only had this number of people. I'm like, whoa, that's an awesome number, right? Like,
Hmm.
remember, we're pioneering new markets, right? Like we have no presence. Don't expect that you're going to see what we have down here in Texas that we've been doing for 20 years and immediately get the same number in a brand new market. Like it just doesn't happen. So the point with all of it is like when you're building out organic elements within an organization, it requires commitment. Like you need to go into it basically saying, I am allocating X capital, and this is exactly what I'm going to spend on these initiatives in order to be able to then see future client growth. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, yeah. It's super interesting. I think about it even with any entrepreneur, right? Any entrepreneur you want to go deep on your subject, right? Whoever your prospect is, but also that it's not just that it happens overnight. It's not just putting a sign out, probably even for that lawn company, right? It's much more than that. That they've created an environment in those neighborhoods where everybody sees their trucks and their materials all the time, right? Like there's a certain amount of stability and history to your point of being in there for a long time. People look at us and are like, where did Muriel come from? Like you guys have only been out, a few years, and that's true, but we all had 20, 25 year corporate careers first. And so we're building on those decades of history and bringing a different viewpoint to the market that we think is, convictionally, better. Tell me a little bit about your team. You mentioned the firm has been built, through this Herculean efforts of your team, which is amazing. Every great growth story has a great team, but your team has also changed, as you said, as you've kind of maybe professionalized and continued to build the business and get to these different levels of growth. Is your original team still with you? How did you decide, when you needed to bring in that professional leadership team?
You know, I think, I touched on it a bit, but that was the hardest part of this talent war.
Yeah,
Truthfully, and I kind of have this mental image of a puzzle set. I was trying to think as you were asking the question. I think every one of the OGs is still here.
I
If
love
you,
saying OGs
yeah.
too, right? Yeah,
Yeah. I'm and now they're all equitized and I'd say
awesome.
very happy. I can't recall one leaving. Now that I think about it, I mean, we've had some client service role, like some of the operational side of the business that come and go, but
Sure.
not any of the leadership for sure is all still here. The core advisors all still here. Um, you know, one thing I'll say is every obstacle I've ever encountered has ultimately been a door for something else, right? And so it's important to know that when the stuff happens, right? Like be ready for what that is building in the future. But when I think about the leadership team, the hardest part was really r- figuring out who I needed around me, right? And then because truthfully, when I think about client service side and I think about advisor headcount and I think of like that's almost easy, right?
Yeah,
Because
because
it's
you knew that. Like, you've
you
always
know
known
it.
that. You've been doing that for 20 years, whatever, however many years. Like, you grew up in that space. You knew what you needed as an advisor from the CSA team. You probably didn't
Exactly.
know
Yeah.
what you needed
And
from
I
a
think
president.
it was really, really important to define the expectations for each of those roles, right? It's like, as an advisor, right? To me, any advisor really can't properly service more than 125 to 150 clients. Like you get to a point past that, like it's not the service experience that our clients are accustomed to, right? Plus, the advisors need capacity to be able to do all of the work around servicing them. But we also have a tremendous amount of infrastructure underneath them, right? So dedicated client service team, dedicated operations team, dedicated financial planning team, portfolio management team. So like our advisors show up and just interact with clients, which is amazing, right? Like you take all the minutiae away from it and now you've got a really empowered advisor. The one thing that I will say, and let's just I call it a frustration for me. And I will fully attest, every individual is wired a little bit differently, right? Like, Tony Robbins saying there's campers and there's climbers. You get to a point where with a lot of individuals where they hit their number, whatever their number is, they want to make 300 grand, they want to make 500 grand, they want to make $1 million, whatever it is. And then they just kind of hot tub, right? That's the camper. And then you do have some individuals that are very, let's just say growth oriented. And I'll put my hand up for that one, right? Like they usually haven't pinnacled the mountain and they're on to the next mountain, right? Like, and so one of the things that I think is really important is understanding where people are and their respective journeys as we're building this enduring organization. Because there's absolutely nothing wrong with an individual that wants balance in life and
That's right.
building the infrastructure around them so that they can have the fulfillment they want in a workplace, fulfillment they want in their home life, and all the other fun things. And like I think about my purpose now is I'm almost living off of their balance. Bless my wife, she's an absolute saint. She puts up with me. But it's like I live for watching other people's journeys as well, and I think it's really really fun. Coming back to the original question, sorry, but all of those other roles to me are easy. The hardest part was building the leadership team and getting those personalities right. I mean, and so we're an EOS organization. I think every business needs an operating system. Like, let's
So
start
funny. As
there.
you were talking, I was like, I bet you're EOS.
Yeah,
And obviously you're the visionary and you're the culture keeper. And then you needed an integrator
bingo,
inside. Yeah.
bingo. And I think about like for lack of better words, my original right hand, like my
Mhm.
COO, she was the perfect integrator when in this first leg of the growth journey, like absolute perfect. And by the way, she's still perfect. But the reality is the needs of the individuals of within an organization change as the organization changes. That I messed up, right? Like I could have done a better job recognizing that earlier, right? And that absolutely impacted some. I always look backwards what I could have done differently.
Same. Hmm.
I could have grown faster if I had done this.
Self
Um,
actualization and self awareness, they kind of go together.
yeah, it can be bad though. So, it's getting right butts, right seats. I think first and foremost, really leaning into a good operating system. We love EOS. Anybody who hasn't read Gino Wickman's book, fantastic. Like, start there. But I will say is understanding the role assignments. Yes, I am the quintessential visionary, but without a good integrator that can continue to keep with the organization as it continues to grow, you're gonna hit ceilings, right? And you're gonna hit places where it's breakdowns in communication, it's culture hits, it's all the different things. One thing that I've come to appreciate is managing egos as you grow is so important. And especially when you're bringing in outsiders, right? Like, you think about the hired guns, right? I think about hired individuals who have 25, 30-year careers that they're used to the journey that they went through. But their journey is very different than our journey. Like, and you mentioned culture,
Mhm.
because culture is like the epicenter of things I think about. And recognizing that integration, you really have to commit to that, right? Like, and I think about me, like, when I hired my president, bless his heart, right? Like, he comes on board, and I go on 6 straight weeks of traveling, and he's like, "Does James actually work here?" Like, and that's part of the journey, and being intentional as you're growing. You need to spend the time with your people to get that culture integration right. That was, again, that's another thing I think I messed up a lot.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, and I think I love the self awareness, right? I think that is exactly how we grow and learn. And the growth that you guys have had has just been tremendous. So you've had to do lot of self awareness in here and a lot of like company awareness, right? Like what's working well, what's working not well, and sort of fix them. You've often said that, like in your growth journey, which now almost to 4 billion, incredible, in 6 years. I love it. But you said everything broke. What was like one of the things that surprised you that broke?
These organic engines are fantastic. Nothing pains me more than not having the capacity to deal with prospect lead flow. And we hit that
Yes.
point.
Yes.
We hit that point in 22, 23. And this is why that I come back to that data comment. And again, another lesson I learned, but why it's so important to understand the data so that you can do advanced capacity planning. And this is where I think about some of the mistakes that I've made, but one that not by the way, we had the organization built to double. And we 4x'd like in a year, brought 1 billion assets in 21, and then another 600 in 22. And we couldn't get human capital fast enough. Like I'm not one to just hire to fill a seat. Like I want right people. And this is again, you talk about the surprises, didn't have the training programs built correctly, like my expectation is I hire an advisor who's got 15 years of experience in CFP that they know everything I know. Can come
They
back to
just
self
didn't. Yeah.
they should just know,
Different set of clients.
or like osmosis, right? Like it's just going. It doesn't happen that way, right? You got to build the training. Yeah, and so coming back, like I think some of the things that broke that were surprising was not having capacity. When I think about some of the individuals that haven't worked out with us, it's like a willingness to be able to indoctrinate into our culture, the Bogart way, like and that's again, it's just so important to work on those things and be intentional about it.
Yeah. One of the things I say a lot is I don't love the word culture, by the way, because you can't spell culture without the word cult. But then at the same time, maybe a cult's okay because you're doing things in the Bogart way, right? Maybe the Bogart way, maybe the Bogart cult is the right cult, and that you want people to sort of ride for the brand, right? So it's a funny balance. I think I'm trying to
I,
figure that out.
I would absolutely agree with you, actually. I mean, it's the thing is I think about the concept of right butt right seat. Like you want people that are the absolute disciples of the organization. Like they have the same level of clarity that you, me as the founder have, right? And like again, I think about where I've made mistakes a lot. That is one of them. Part of it is, one of the things I will say is careful what you wish for because you're going to get it. Like I am a very strong manifester. I have come to appreciate that might be one of my superpowers. But it's one of these things where as I've gone after the things, right, it's pulled me out of that role, that seat, that capacity, right, and it's just pulled me apart in a lot of different ways. But it's also made it really really difficult for my team to get access to me, right? And so like, and then nothing drives me more crazy than they're like, well, we know you're busy and we don't want to. I'm like, yeah, but this is so much more important. Like, come in, open the door, right? Like,
You mentioned a moment ago data and how data and data cleanliness, data governance has been like super critical. And one of the things I was so interested in with your story is that prior to the pandemic and your kind of pivot to digital marketing, you were doing these in person events and you knew exactly how many people were coming, how many appointments you'd get. Like you could kind of predict the success and your growth journey based on doing these in person events. And then the pandemic hit and you went digital. Talk about that pivot from like even a data standpoint. Like how did you rework your funnels, so to speak?
yeah. So, we used to do. We originally started doing lunches for these targeted organizations. We had to transition to dinners based upon geographic shifts that happened with the company that we were targeting. But for every dinner we were doing, and again, took 15 years plus to get to this point, but we were getting 60 to 80 individuals at every single dinner that we were doing. We were doing two, sometimes three a month. And for every event that we did, roughly 35% of the attendees were brand new prospects. Of those, 65% came in for a consultation with us. And then of those, 87% became a client. Now, remember, this is the days when it was just me, right? Like, and me, sorry,
But you
me,
knew those numbers. Like so many advisors don't even know those numbers.
well, when you're spending tens of thousands of dollars on every single event and you don't have the tens of thousands of dollars, you start to there's an element of like the journey, right? I talk about like the attributes of successful people. It's resourceful, it's resiliency, it's in a lot of grit. One of the things I've commonly talked about that I miss the most is my desperation, right? Like as I talk to some of these organizations that we're looking to partner with, there's one the two brothers that I'm just so inspired by every single time I talk to them. Like they are where I was 5 years ago, and I so desperately want to partner with them because I know how to 5x them. Like, and I can do it really quickly. And again, those types of conversations don't happen overnight. But the point is like I see the things that they're doing, and I'm like, yep, that's what I used to do. Like I miss
Hmm.
that part that like you think that way, and then you get into a point where as you grow, like things change. But coming back to the question, I knew the data because I needed to know the data, right? Like why am I investing this type of capital, spending $200,000-300,000 a year on these dinners if I'm not going to see a return? And I needed to understand like what are my client acquisition costs, right? Like getting into client lifetime value, understanding the ratio of client acquisition costs versus acquisition value, so I can understand where I'm leaning in or where I need to be pulling back from. And so that was pre-COVID. And by the way, when it was a very lean organization, and the numbers weren't what the numbers were. I mean, I would say on a relative basis, it was kind of easy to remember most of it. And we use
Hmm.
Salesforce. So we were able to build out funnels within Salesforce.
Yeah.
I was super blessed to have an extremely talented individual who, by the way, when we were smaller, a lot of us were wearing lots of different hats, right? Like I was CEO, chief compliance officer, chief business development officer, like financial advisor. And this individual was an advisor, but also helped me build out all of our technology, our original technology, the workflows, the dashboard, so I could see things. And I come back to like when things weren't good. And by the way, nothing drives me more crazy when someone says it must be nice, because I'm like, you have no idea what I went through, right? Like we're not going to spend the podcast talking about what I went through, but when things weren't good, I always leaned in on BD, at
Hmm.
business development, and it was
Yep.
because I had access to that type of data. Now, as soon as the spigots opened, so we transitioned. March 23rd of 2020 was the first digital event I did. I took the content that I'd already been doing as the dinner seminars. I pivoted a little bit, rebranded it. I called it "Can I Still Afford to Retire?" And we went from getting 60 to 80 people at our dinners. We had 397 people at my first Zoom, which you want to talk about scary? That was scary. 397 people on my first Zoom. Another 700 people watched the recording that week. Light bulb went off. It's like, oh my gosh, what have I been missing? Now, I fully attest we had a captive audience with everybody during COVID, but the reality of it is that it changed everything for us. So the next 2 weekends, I committed to filming all that content, right? So I had 25 different events. I came in Saturday, Sunday, brought a bunch of suits in, and I more or less curated these were webinars, but it was just digital educational content. We spent about $25,000 redoing our website. Fast forward July 4th week, we had 100 new prospects in a week. And that flow just took off. So I had to repurpose one of my people to just help me handle the inbound, because originally it was just me doing all the inbound, but I
Hmm.
had to repurpose one of my individuals to help handle inbound and then booking meetings. And then that was it, off to the races. But the data got harder, as soon as that volume. And so when we talk about things that broke, that was one that broke. We had to
Hmm.
change. We had to adapt. We I think back, like we were using Excel to do our email distribution list, right? Like again, you have to be resourceful.
Yeah, that's right.
But
That's how we start. It's a little gritty and it's a little garage band level, you know?
we literally started Bogart Wealth in my basement.
Yeah.
Yep. Folding tables. We got outed a couple weeks before we were originally going to go, so we didn't have office space. So My garage was the postage station. My basement was where we had all the printers, and we had clients come to my house and signing paperwork at the dining room table. You just make it work,
You
right?
just do what you got to do. And
Yeah.
you're like, I'll have office space in a few weeks. It's great. And in terms of a transition, we tell people to do that all the time, right? Like take the co-working space for the short amount of time if you need it. And then figure out your long-term office
I
space.
think so many people get paralyzed by the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Like that it
And
prevents.
perfection.
Well, yes, absolutely. They think it has to be perfect in order to be
Mhm.
able to do it. The answer is absolutely not, because when I look back on my journey, there was nothing perfect about what I did. There's certain things that I would say were intentional, certain things that were kind of accidental positives. There were certain things that were, oh my gosh, this was terrible. But the reality of it is momentum and just getting going is the most important part of any of these entrepreneurial journeys.
Yeah, those accidental positives, I call those actually strategic intuition.
No.
Right? It was actually you were intuitively strategic, but it was intuitive. It wasn't like you were sitting down going, "Okay, what's my strategy?" It was just like, "This feels like the right thing. Let's go."
Um, yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? Like, I would say, like, I think about where we are now. We don't have a single client that represents more than 60 basis points of our revenue. That was accidental. I'm not going to say it was intentional. I mean, like, but we have
Yeah.
no concentration risk. I have not a single client that would economically harm our future. I feel abundantly grateful for that, but obviously it's a
Yes.
tremendous amount of work because it's a lot more volume than a lot of almost $4 billion RIAs, right? Like,
Yeah.
we don't have
Yeah.
institutional clients. We're all mom and pop. Like, the average account size of the firm's about 2.2 million, right? Like, yeah, don't get me wrong. We've got big stuff, we've got small stuff, but the point is like, it's
Yeah.
volume based. We are very much, let's just say, mom and pop.
Yeah. But you know who you are and you know who you're serving and you know them extremely well. I mean, my gosh,
Well,
you moved to Texas for them.
it's so funny you say that, because every single time I chased the shiny object, it was an absolute failure and a huge
Yeah.
distraction. Like, that's probably one of the best lessons I would try to instill on anyone who's on their journey is like, be intentional about where you're going, like focused, stay disciplined, try to eradicate the shiny objects, because they're going to happen all the time. It's like we had an opportunity for an NFL player at one point, big one, and I spent so much time on like building out the presentation materials and going down and doing the players association stuff and like all this stuff. And then, he ended up going with somebody else that was working with somebody in the locker room. I'm like, all right, like, if I had just applied that same level of time, energy, and focus to my fairway, like what I'm really good at, again, another one of those things that could have grown faster, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, that's a great lesson to sort of get to our ending point on. I have just a few real quick lightning round questions. I call them. What is one function or hire? And you've kind of talked about this a little bit, but one function or hire that you'd invest in earlier if you had it to redo.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Um, Two come to mind really early on. Business development officer, right? Like somebody to take it off of the Jungle Hunter founder, whoever, but get that person hired early on. Their core focus is all around building a scalable business development process that's not dependent upon you, one person. The other one, just because I just think it's so important, and I'm still struggling with this one, but it's an internal corporate trainer. I think a lot of things get figured out when you can have conformity of process, conformity of training, like everybody doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's great. All right, and then what is something that means more to you than AUM, a metric of some sort?
Client retention.
Client retention, yeah, that's a great one.
Yep.
And then what is one way, and this is always the question we end it with because of the name of the podcast, Advisors Off Script. What's one way that you're living an off script life right now?
What's the script?
Yeah.
Yeah. The reality is I've made a lot of sacrifices in my career that has impacted the people that I love the most. Not always in a positive way. Sure, they're the beneficiaries of the outcome, but for me, my journey has not always been a positive one. And the reality of it is I've had to overcome a lot of things, both personally, professionally, and it's an isolating environment, right? Like, and so when I think about the off script nature of the question, it really comes down to like I miss that desperation that I had. I really genuinely do. But knowing that I've been challenged every single step of my journey. And now I'm at this other point where people are challenging me as to why am I continuing to do what I do? And just know that you're not alone in that journey. Because I've found my community in that regards as well. Like entrepreneurs are wired just differently. Like there's a little bit of crazy in there. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You think about what greatness has come from people who are doing things off script. Like a lot of these big companies wouldn't exist if it wasn't for really great human beings that are going down a different pathway that everybody else is challenging. And I would never have been able to create what I did if I lived a scripted life.
Yeah, love that. It's so good for you to say that and also to bring up sort of the depth at which it takes too, right? Like it's a mindset, it's a mental game all along the way as well. And you certainly, we didn't talk about the challenges that you faced. People can go listen to
You
all of
know,
your stuff
I've
and they
done other
should.
podcasts.
Huh?
I've done other podcasts on those.
Exactly. Yeah. Go listen to the stuff because there's such a journey with that. I mean, we focused a lot on sort of the business journey today, but there was a huge personal journey that you've gone through.
I think it's really, really, really important to find a good community that can help with that journey. Because again, I felt isolated. I felt lonely. There's even conversations right now that I can't have with my staff, right? That I'm working on, that you need those people that you can lean on, consultants or coaches, getting your team, right? Like you think about like some of the high performance athletes or performer, musicians, like they're not doing it alone, right? Like they've got teams of people who are helping them. And this industry is not immune to that, right? Like success is very lonely. It's isolating. People will always judge you from their shoes where they are currently standing. They're not in yours, so they don't understand what you're going through or why you're going through it. And I'm really proud of the things that I've had to overcome. And frankly, I'm even more proud of the people who have endured the journey with me. I mean, my wife, I can't speak highly enough about my wife and the things that she has put up with from me. And why I couldn't even
We
begin to.
love a good partnership for sure.
Well,
And you guys have had that.
yeah, no, I mean, not to get too down the road, but like I literally launched the company 1 week into being married, like blew up our whole lives. So the point is you got to have that team around you.
That's right.
And I don't believe in a script at all.
Awesome. James, thank you so much for the honesty, the frameworks, the thinking, just sharing your story. Really appreciate it. This was one of the most fun conversations that I've had and one of the ones that every time I talk to you I learn so much for my own business too. So to our listeners, if you've built something real and you're asking, bigger questions, this episode was completely for you. Get clear on what you want, build the systems, hire the people. And James, one of my favorite sayings of you is be very careful what you wish for because you're going to get it. So thanks so much for being
Thanks,
here.
Shelby. It was fun.